Industry watchers, the organized private sector, Labour, and Nigeria's main opposition party, People's Democratic Party, have all condemned an upward review by the federal government in electricity tariff, especially now that Nigerians are struggling to deal with the hardship being inflicted by the COVID-19 pandemic. But the government, in a statement, explained that the prices paid by household and business premises within less than 12 hours of power supply will remain frozen and will be subsidized. The Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, in an order copied all distribution companies, said it hiked the price tariffs considering the change in inflation rate, foreign exchange, generation capacity, gas prices, among other things. The latest increase comes after 4 months after the last one, which was unsuccessfully opposed by organized labor, prompting a temporary suspension. I mean, I just want Dr. Abati just to give us, the robust, outlook on this and an understanding of all of this that is happening in the commentary. Dr. Abati.
Well, first of all, there's been a controversy over whether this has been a 50% increase or a 100% increase. But the NERC, the Electricity Regulatory Commission, has come forward to say that this is not a 50% increase or a 100% increase. The NERC says the new MITO that has been announced, what it does simply is to adjust the prices to reflect, first, the inflation rate. The inflation rate at a point was about 11%. The rate of inflation just shot up within the space of 1 year by more than 4%. And then at the moment it's about 4.9%, which was what was reported as at November 2020. Now, if you look at the rate of increase, it's not even up to that 4% of inflation rate. So the NERC may be right in that regard to say that, look, this is not really an increase in the sense in which it is being interpreted as a doubling of tariffs. Second reason given by the NERC is the fact that the NAFEX rate, the foreign exchange rate, has also gone up. NAFEX rate has moved from 380 naira at a point to about 410 naira, and then it was reduced to about 394 naira. Now, the whole point about this is that every component within the electricity sector is determined either by foreign exchange or by inflation rate, and we cannot deceive ourselves that at a time when you have market forces determining everything, that there will not be adjustment in prices. Now, I'm not trying to act as a government spokesperson, but I'm just trying to explain, the explanation that the NERC has put forward. Simply to say that, look, this is determined by realities, and that it's not as if prices have been doubled. If you look at what the Ikeja Disco did, when in September last year, the NERC had first made the attempt to increase electricity tariffs, resulting in protests by people. You recall that at that time there was a band that NERC defined, which is from A to E. Now, even with this increase, if you look at the Ikeja one, it was about 56 naira per kilowatt hour for certain bands and lower for C, D, E consumption bands, right? Now, what they have done this time around is just to adjust the prices by maybe 2 naira for certain categories, 4 naira for certain categories. In other words, if you were paying, let's say, 46 naira per kilowatt hour as at September, November last year, now the adjustment is just +2, which is you now pay 2 naira extra. Or for certain bands, you pay 4 naira extra.
Yes.
But for certain other categories, D and E, you are not paying at all. Yeah. I think the example I'm referring to is that of Eco Disco. That's the one that I'm quoting. Okay, that's it on the screen.
Yes.
Okay, Eco Disco. Those are the figures that I'm quoting. So this is the reality of it. And I think that where I see an omission is that there should have been better consultation between the NERC and the organized labor. Because you recall that last year, organized labor kicked, and then the tariffs were reduced. Then in November, the tariffs went up again, and organized labor was part of that negotiation. Now, organized labor, through the Trade Union Congress, is saying this time around, I mean, why would they increase tariffs within 2 months when there is still a dispute on the ground that has not been resolved? Now, perhaps if they had been carried along before this was made public, maybe the kind of tension we have now will not exist. So there is misinterpretation. It's not really a 50% increase. It's not a 100% increase. But my own argument is that, look, perhaps if you have the metering program going very well, the federal government says metering is compulsory, 1 million meters will be made available. Now, maybe people will have greater confidence. They will be forced to become more energy efficient. I mean, take a close friend of mine, the managing director of Arise TV. At a time, she was being charged outrageous, tariffs on a monthly basis because it was an estimated billing. And she used to have a lot of anxiety over it until she took up the matter and said, look, no, you cannot do this to me. So she pursued the matter, went to the EcoDisco, which falls within our own area of jurisdiction, and she challenged the figures. At the end of the day, they had to provide her with a meter. And as of today, Joma Wogugu will tell you, well, she feels more confident that what she pays is realistic, is based on consumption, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But if she didn't take it up, if she didn't get that meter, she will be in the same category with many Nigerians who, when they are given a bill, they will say, look, this bill is estimated, so why should I trust it? Right? They will say, okay, estimated billing in any case is to make up for shortfall in revenue. You know, it's a very strategic way of subsidizing other people, right? They look at the size of your building, they look at your neighborhood, and they give you high tariffs. But if this metering program goes well, maybe people will be more relaxed. Maybe people will even be more energy efficient. Because if you know that your consumption is being properly calculated, then you won't be turning on your water heater 24 hours. And there are some homes where the AC never goes off. 24 hours, the AC is on. Either it's being used or it's not being used, right? So all of this, there are many dimensions to it. But I think that what the Electricity Regulatory Commission needs to do is to engage labor. Because the TUC is threatening that they will go on strike. They will disrupt the system. I do not think that what they've done now, in terms of the MITO, which even in the original framework is supposed to be reviewed on a periodic basis, I don't think is already offensive. I do not think so.
I mean, you made a very valid point about metering, which has been something we've been talking about for all these years in Nigeria.
That's the crux of the matter.
That's the crux of the matter. They've even talked about smart metering and the likes. We need to be able to get meters in this country. I don't know how we can do it effectively. I know we had a national rollout meter program, but I don't know how far that one has fared. They said they were going to give about 2 to 3 million people meters for free. That's the crux of the matter, and it has to be said. But in the long run, we need to tell ourselves the hard truth. For you to have a vibrant power sector in this country, you must have cost-reflective tariff. And the tariff we have on ground now is not cost-reflective. Exactly. And I'll give you the stats. It's so shocking that most new power projects and power investments, people prefer to take those contracts to countries like Senegal, where they have cost-reflective tariff and effective metering system that will bring them to Nigeria. Because with that, they know they can recoup their money. Indeed. Power sector is like a business. Once people give the service, they should be able to recoup their money.
In fact, at this point, I mean, I know it makes me keep sounding like a government spokesperson. At this point, government is not even talking in Nigeria about cost-reflective tariffs. Government is talking about service-reflective tariffs. And when you look at some of those figures that I talked about later, in a sense, government is still subsidizing many electricity consumers.
Definitely.
Right? But we need to have clarity and certainty if the metering program succeeds. Because people then can consciously manage energy more efficiently. NERC has said that by July to December 2021, that's when they will begin to consider cost-reflective tariffs as different from service-reflective tariffs. And we hope that before then, more and more people will get their meters. And if they do not get their meters, Well, they should follow the example of Ijoma Nwogugu that I mentioned earlier, and actively demand
for your meter, because you need to be given a meter. You need to see what you're using, and I don't see why it's a big deal just to get a common meter to be able to read.
Well, a meter is not so common. Those meters are imported with foreign exchange.
Why can't we produce
have plans to locally produce.
Why can't we produce those? It falls back to the matter we keep talking about. Why can't we produce? Do you know if we produce meters, do you know the job it will create for people?
Well,
many questions. All right, thank you guys so much. We'll move on to more business this morning. Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Michael?
Good
Michael, I'm
morning.
sure you've got a meter in your house anyway.
Yeah, we have actually.
Don't compare apples and oranges.
And got a water meter as well. I wish I hadn't, because I seem to be charged much more for, well, especially in the summer when I'm watering my lawn. But that's got a way to come. We've got snow on the way, so I don't think I'll be worrying too much about water. And basically, what's happening this morning is that what's going on in Georgia, whatever actually is going on in Georgia, and that of course is a difficult one at the moment because it's all on a knife edge there. But that's tending to dominate the markets. Futures on the S&P 500, Nasdaq and Dow all in retreat this morning in Asia, unwinding around half of their overnight gains. Now, normally a Republican victory would be positive for markets and also pushes aside any tax increases. But again, the flip side of that is that there won't be the fiscal stimulus deal, and that's something which is keeping it going. However, President-elect Biden will be confirmed, no doubt, as we enter our afternoon, and you do too. But just one seat, one Republican seat in Georgia would be enough to make it very, very difficult to pass things through the administration there. So Asian markets really just slipping a little bit into the red. The Nikkei down about 1/3%. The Kospi just 1.1% higher, and China down a little. Now, what we've got is another leftover from Trump, which is the shares of Chinese tech giants Tencent and Alibaba, to name two, which have been monitored today and will be monitored throughout the day. US outgoing President Trump has actually signed an executive order banning transactions with a number of, I count 8 actually, Chinese software payment applications, and that includes WeChat Pay and Alipay. It'll only come into effect, he says, when he actually goes, but I think that Republican politicians in the United States should be taking notice of a shot across their bows from US business, which is saying that if you have been supporting President Trump's attempts to overturn the election, in inverted commas, result, then we will look at your funding. So that's something, that's a kind of thing which will continue. Bitcoin, you remember we were talking about that yesterday. I mentioned it in the US recap section of this, because JP Morgan, the leading American bank, is saying that Bitcoin actually could rival gold as a safe haven and quadruple in value, which would take it to an extraordinary price, $146,000. Remember, it was 34 over the weekend, 32 this morning. Again, it's incredibly volatile. I don't think these are waters in which inexperienced investors should go. That's just my point of view. I'm not an advisor. I just observe things from the outside, but I certainly wouldn't touch it. But that's what JP Morgan is saying. Here's a very important story, I think, which we're going to see. This has ramifications, and I know you'll be talking about COVID-19 after me, but I can tell you that the UK has apparently vaccinated more people per capita. Remember that, per capita, than only Bahrain and Israel are, in fact, ahead of the UK. We're ahead of the US, ahead of China, and perhaps more importantly, France and Germany. France, that 52% apparently in a recent survey said they were not interested in being vaccinated. Germany is not happy about that. Germany has actually, and Angela Merkel, the outgoing German president, has actually given away costing, testing, and also the program of vaccine jabs to Brussels. And Germans are very unhappy about this. They're saying that, you know, if we had our own way, then we would be doing it much more quickly. And remember, they've got elections coming up later this year, so that'll be a very important issue for them. But there we are. So the health, that sort of vaccine is really at the health issues at the front of traders' minds. UK top 60,000 people for the first time yesterday. Growing feeling that things will get worse before they get better. New strains and all the rest of it. Today, the governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, meets to talk about European equivalence. Sounds very boring, but what it means is that a lot of the mechanisms that make money for the City of London are now on hold, basically, until there is some kind of agreement with the European Markets and Securities Authority as to where trading might actually happen. New terms will need to be negotiated. Commodities, this is a good one for you. Oil, OPEC Plus sprung a bit of a surprise yesterday. You will have noted Saudi announcing a unilateral 1 million barrel a day cut, and that easily offset the 75,000 barrel a day increase granted to Russia and Kazakhstan. So oil climbed about 5% overnight. Gold, again, a very choppy range, really, bearing in mind that news about Bitcoin and so on. Day ahead, quite an important one. FOMC minutes, obviously, trying to find out what the central bank in the United States, A, thinks about inflation, and B, about the increase in COVID cases there and the effect on the economy. And then, of course, Friday non-farm payrolls. We'll get a slice of the employment picture tomorrow as well. Probably not be too terrible, but it may well be. If it is, then that will increase pressure for a stimulus plan in the United States. But given the foment of politics over there at the moment, anything's possible. That's the global view this morning.
Right, great one, Michael's there. I think it was Le Figaro, the French newspaper, that was saying this morning. I was in a survey, and I was talking about how the people, about 63% of the people surveyed, over 160,000 people, said they were not satisfied with the vaccination program in France, that President Macron has done an appalling job. But I want to talk about the illusion called Chinese capitalism, vis-a-vis the case of Ant Financial and Jack Ma. You see how it's gone now. It's obvious that the so-called Chinese capitalism, they want Chinese businessmen to do well, is no longer the case if it threatens the state. What's the future for Chinese big firms in general? What will this be telling firms like Weibo, WeChat, and some other Chinese companies that want to scale in the States?
Yeah, I agree with you. I couldn't agree more. We haven't heard a great deal from Jack Ma in the opening days of this year, have we? But we did hear a lot from him last year. You remember, as you're saying, that Ant Financial's IPO was cancelled by the Chinese authorities. Yeah, as you say, they are very worried about corporate China overtaking state China. That's their big thing. How we actually deal with that, I'm not quite sure. This should be at the front of politicians' minds in countries away from China right now. Certainly the EU will need to come to terms with it. Joe Biden, even though he has a new trade secretary she is an expert, she's a Mandarin speaker, as we've noted before, and she will do very well, I'm sure. And she's much more for compromise. China needs to understand that we are about holding hands. This is not about, never mind the Trump business and so on. The future lies in cooperation. They need us as much as we need them. And I think that what you're noting is this business of this rather odd way in which they approach capitalism. Couldn't agree more. It needs to be discussed. At the moment, we'll watch what happens. But I do feel as though these payment sites, for example, ought to be allowed to continue to grow. Anything that channels money is a good idea. And I feel as though our senior politicians need to make some inroads into some kind of agreement with China about this. It'll take a long time, though.
Well, Michael, 2 quick points. The first is Alibaba. On Monday, Alibaba's stocks went down 3% when there was this concern that Jack Ma has not been seen in public anywhere or that he was missing for about 2 months. But yesterday, Alibaba stocks went up by about 5% when it was said that Jack Ma was just lying low. Why will he lie low? Is he under any kind of threat from the Chinese state just because of the comment he made about the regulatory framework in China? That's one. And then Jeremy Grantham, co-founder of GMO, he says that the stock market is going through its last full-fledged epic bubble and that we may be waiting for the last dance. Do you agree with him?
Well, the thing about Cassandras who come across with bad news is they usually write once in their lifetimes. I don't agree with him, no. I feel as though, here's why I don't agree, because there is so much cheap money around at the moment that anything will push the stock markets forward. I'm not saying it's realistic, it's just what they do. They look to the future, they look at cheap money. What's not to like about that? Now, I was reading over the weekend, and I'm sure you saw it too, this idea of the new monetary idea about things, that money, you can actually grow money on trees. I don't believe that, but what we're actually seeing is central banks helping the stock market hugely with cheap money. Whether that leads to inflation, Doctor, or not, I don't know. I'm skeptical about inflation right now, but as I said yesterday, it's something that we should be looking at. As far as Jack Ma's concerned, I think that he's actually playing it very sensibly. He doesn't need anything. He doesn't need to say anything about the Chinese government. If people want to use his services, then they will. The people will decide this one way or the other. If the Chinese want to embrace capitalism, and I've just been saying, a peculiar country.
Okay, Michael, thank you so much for your insight. And when you said if money grew on tree, I just remember a rap line there. I don't want to say it and post my raps on air, but we'll go straight to a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for your time, Michael. All right, pleasure to have you back. It's time to take COVID-19 updates here. This one more does justice to that.
Thank you, Rufai. Well, the numbers are stacked and they are growing globally wherever you look. And so let's look at the global figures. We have now surpassed 86 million COVID infections globally. Thankfully, people are also recovering, but unfortunately, 1.86 million people have now died from the virus. And in Nigeria here, the Center for Disease Control has confirmed another 1,354 fresh cases of coronavirus infections in the last 24 hours. It's a new major record figure on its daily count of cases. Lagos alone accounted for more than half of the new cases with 712 positive samples. Meanwhile, data from the WHO, which is currently on the screen, shows that 1 in every 5 people tested in Nigeria actually comes back positive. The WHO says that the country's positivity rate jumped from 4.2% to 21.3% in just 1 month. And this suggests higher transmission, but the statistic doesn't seem to be stopping Nigerians in their tracks. Also yesterday, the PTF announced the Presidential Task Force against COVID-19 announced the establishment of at least 1 oxygen gas plant in each state of the Federation to aid its availability to sustain life support, especially for COVID patients. We're also told that the private sector-led coalition, CACOVID, has also weighed in on helping to supply oxygen. And of course, we also hear that over 700 National Youth Service Corps members in Batch B have tested positive. Away from Nigeria, Zimbabwe has also recorded its highest daily cases and deaths. The country recorded 1,365 coronavirus cases and 34 deaths yesterday as it began a month-long lockdown to curb the surging infections. Health officials say the country's hospitals are being overwhelmed and they are suspecting, even though they have not identified, they are suspecting that the new variant identified in South Africa, neighboring South Africa, may be responsible for the spike they are seeing. And we may have to wait longer to find the origins, the true origins of the novel coronavirus. That's because the head of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, said yesterday that he was very disappointed that China has still not authorized the entry of a team of international experts. You will recall that a 10-strong-man team had been due to set off early this month as a part of a long-awaited mission to actually probe the early cases of the coronavirus, first reported a year ago in Wuhan, China. According to Dr. Ghebreyesus, he says Chinese officials have not yet finalized the necessary permission for the team's arrival in China. He says that the WHO is hoping that this is just a logistic and bureaucratic issue that can be resolved very quickly. And on vaccine inoculation schedules, the World Health Organization says that it understands that countries are struggling. It is recommending that people get 2 doses of the Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine, which is the only vaccine it has validated, within 21 to 28 days. And in exceptional circumstances of supply constraints, as we are witnessing across the globe, a second dose can actually be delayed for 6 weeks to maximize the number of individuals benefiting from a first dose. You will recall that the UK had said that it was going to spread the schedule across 3 months, but the WHO is saying you can do this for at least 6 weeks. Pfizer says it doesn't have any data to show that people can get protection in the length of that 3 months that the UK government is actually thinking about. And for more details on this, you can check the Arise website for the latest statistics, the latest figures, and of course the latest stories on COVID-19.
I just want to, okay, Doctor.
Okay, I wanted to comment on the Nigerian situation.
Yes.
Oftentimes on this program, we've been asking for clarity, certainty, further transparency in terms of what the Nigerian government is doing. We have had cause to protest that, look, various speakers quote the Nigerian Primary Healthcare Development Agency, but the Nigerian Primary Healthcare Agency itself was not speaking up for itself. But yesterday, at the weekly briefing of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, we had the Executive Director of the Nigerian Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Dr. Shuaib, coming forward to speak. And he was able to shed a lot of light on what Nigeria is doing, as opposed to the kind of vague reports we've been getting. Oh, it's the MPHDA that is in charge and all that. And what did he say yesterday that I think is useful? He said, one, that Nigeria is expecting about 100,000 doses of the Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine by the end of January. For the first time, we know that the vaccine that Nigeria is expecting is the Pfizer and BioNTech, vaccine. What he did not tell us is whether that vaccine will be subjected to any kind of clinical trial in Nigeria before it is administered. But now we know it is 100,000 doses for January. And he says that in total, 42 million doses would be received under the COVAX facility. Yes. Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine representing about 20% of the Nigerian population. Now, Dr. Shaib then went a step further to also identify the persons who would receive these vaccines when they arrive. He talked about first responders, frontline health workers, the vulnerable and the elderly. Mm-hmm. And then there was a category that he identified that I think we should interrogate further. He talked about strategic national leadership. Now, what is this strategic national leadership? I guess by this is referring to politicians. Mm-hmm. And we had always expressed concern here that, look, whatever vaccine Nigeria gets should not be for politicians and their families. Yes. I can assure you that 100,000 doses of Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine, if it arrives, from the way Dr. Shaib sounded, it may well just be for members of the National Assembly and governors and lawmakers and their families.
They need to improve vaccine hesitancy.
Yes, so that should not be the interest of the Nigerian government. Now, the question I asked is, apart from the charity allocated to poor countries by the COVAX facility, what other effort is Nigeria making to get vaccines? What waiting orders have we put there? On what waiting list are we? What kind of payments are we planning? Then, of course, that was later clarified by Boss Mustafa, the chairperson of the Presidential Task Force. No, not Boss Mustafa, by
Dr.
Onyema, Geoffrey Onyema, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who disclosed that Nigeria is already engaged in diplomatic discussions with China to be able to get vaccines from China. Well, I know that China has only approved one vaccine, which is already now been administered in China. So is that the same vaccine that we're trying to get? And do we have structures in place, not just for double-checking these vaccines, but also for an operational plan that will ensure that these things are distributed? Now, I mentioned Boss Mustafa's name earlier. I wanted to mention his name in relation to the fact that he disclosed in his own presentation that the problem of oxygen supply, which has been part of the challenge for Nigeria, is now being addressed by Kakovit. That is the private sector coalition involved in the COVID-19 battle in Nigeria. And we're told that Kakovit is going to be providing about 100 oxygen cylinders per day until the end of February. And I think that Kakovit, if they can do that, if they can keep that promise, they deserve every commendation. In addition to that, the President of Nigeria has approved the establishment in every state of the Federation an oxygen plant as part of efforts to fight COVID-19. I think that also is a welcome development. However, the point remains, as pointed out by Boss Mustafa, that more and more people are testing positive. The batch B of the National Youth Service Corps program in Nigeria, out of about 32,000, over 32,000 youth corps members across the country, every state of the Federation has reported cases of infection in the NYSC batch B camp. 731 total at the moment. But by the time they complete that testing process, you can be sure that there will be more. Yes. And this is the harvest, we're told. That's their own explanation from the decision of the Nigerian people to be reckless with COVID-19, particularly during the just ended Yuletide season. So the situation remains very serious. But all of this information is not just about effort. It's also about what government does with data. If it is true that more and more batch B NYSC candidates are testing positive, should that batch B NYSC program not be suspended? And these children sent back home, these students sent back home, you know, to go and isolate until it is safe. It's not compulsory that we must do NYSC program by force, by fire. Okay? Yeah. So these are the issues in the Nigerian situation, which I think is what should be of our primary interest.
All right. All right. Thank you so much for that. For up there, thank you so much, Adis, for presenting that.